right, so we're so happy to have you back, Alex. And I think our topic for today is availability bias.
You are right. You are right. And everyone's sorry we were gone for 2 weeks. One was because of smoke and fires in California. Then last week, Hope and I were traveling. So it's good to be back. And so I'll give just a little thumbnail of the YouTube teachings that we did the last 2 weeks. The first one was about bondage versus addiction. And I referenced Viktor Frankl in that, who was in one of the most horrible situations there's ever been in the history of the world, in the Holocaust as a prisoner. And he found that he could unlock or create an internal freedom that really, in a sense, made him free in any situation, even being in that horrible, unthinkable bondage. And that so many people, that's what you're lacking, is freedom. You're dominated by a negative habit, and so you can't lose weight, or you can't be more healthy, or you can't succeed in your career because you can't make the calls you need to make, or whatever that is. And so you feel like you're being held back, you're being shackled, you're in bondage to something in your life that usually involves a negative habit or addiction, or a possible bondage kind of situation. And if there's a war situation in your country, or you're being abused at your home, or something like that. And my advice would always be, if you're being abused, get out of there. I mean, you can try to, figure out the money and repairing the relationship later, but I would never just sit around for abuse. And so the teaching 2 weeks ago was about how to develop inner freedom so that not only our habits and addictions fall away, but we can experience that irreplaceable feeling of freedom in any and every circumstance. The teaching last week, or this week, I would call availability bias. And it's about some brand new research that we have a brain function that we've not known we've had before. And they named it availability bias. And this brain function causes us to naturally, without any effort, lean to the negative in just about any and every situation. And number two, to take things out of context. Like we hear on the news that a murder happened in the town next to us, and all of a sudden we become fearful, when really the chances are greater that I'll be struck by lightning than anything will happen to me, and yet now I'm afraid in my home where I was not afraid before. Well, some of that is because the function of the brain that we've just discovered called availability bias, and some of it is because of what we've talked about so many times before, that the latest studies indicate that about 50% just of what you believe about yourself and your life from recalling memories is in fact in error. 50%. And it's such a big deal that the people that did the research seriously discussed never releasing it, because they thought everyone would become hopeless and the suicide rate would go up and all of that. But the problem is not the availability bias. That's obviously there for a reason. It's the 50% of our memories in error, and the negative being prioritized as more important than the positive, which means the lies, the 50% that's not true, is being prioritized as more important than the 50% that is true. And so we're in a situation where we're getting a double negative virtually all the time, where at worst we're only supposed to get a slight negative to help us survive, not be too risk-taking and get ourselves killed. So we've got to fix that problem, or we're going to be way too negative, and we need to be aware of this new function. And so when we think about, okay, what am I going to do about this, or what am I going to do about that, we need to factor in that it is almost 100% sure that I'm already leaning slightly to very much to the negative of what would be a fair analysis of the facts of this situation, and factor that in and force it back to center. And that'll take some work, because you probably believe that you're not to the negative, a lot of you, but based on this latest research, you almost certainly are. And so just to do it objectively, you've got to kind of force back toward the positive, at least to center. And we talked about some ways to do that. So those are the last 2 weeks. If you haven't heard them and that sounds interesting to you, check them out. And we have finished our top 10 spiritual laws as rated by our listeners over the last 16 years. So we're going to be moving into what I'm calling deep water, where we're going to be talking about controversial issues, social issues. I think the first one I'm going to address is the Black Lives Matter and all of that movement that's going on right now. So I'm looking forward to doing that. We've basically done the spiritual laws for 17 years now, and I think this will be fun. I think it'll be different, and I think it's something we all need to take a serious look at the issues that are happening in the world and with our family and our communities, to see, are we love-based or are we fear-based? Are we acting in truth or are we being deceived? So we're going to try to take an honest look at some of those things, starting either this week or the next. Deep water. So that's it for me, Johanna.
Okay, so if anyone here would like to interact with Alex by asking him a question or commenting on spiritual laws of nature, you can raise your hand by pressing star 2. Star 2 is going to raise your hand. It will open the line for you to be able to communicate with Alex. And if you're online, you can type in a question, and I can share that with Alex. So let's see if anyone has their hands raised. Star 2 will raise your hand. Moment. I don't see any hands raised, Alex.
Okay, well, remember, you can send your questions in. We'll answer them, post the recording, and you can listen to it whenever you want. But the whole purpose of me doing this and doing it for 17 years is, let's start talking about what matters. I love the cover of Psychology Today this month. I saw it when Hope and I were on our little trip. Go look at it. The cover of Psychology Today this month says, love, what really matters. You can't say it better than that. Let's start talking about this stuff in our life with our friends, our family, people at work, whoever. Let's start talking about the stuff that really matters. So, love you all, and that's it for me, Johanna, and see you soon.